The night they called my son a failure, my father held the microphone like it was a weapon. Not casually, not awkwardly, deliberately. 50 people stood in the living room of my parents' house that night. The annual Lawson Christmas party. Expensive catering, perfect lighting, cameras recording. And my 13-year-old son sat beside me in a navy cable knit sweater, the one his great-grandfather gave him before he died. That sweater mattered. Because it was the last time someone in this family had looked at him and seen something worth believing in. My father tapped the microphone. The room went quiet, and then he pointed directly at my son. Some grandchildren, he said, smiling, are the future of this family. Polite laughter. And some, he paused, he looked at Noah, are just a disappointment. Laughter again, not from everyone, but enough. And then he said it, twice. Failure. I felt Noah's body go still beside me, not trembling, not crying. Still. The kind of stillness you only see in children who have learned that reacting makes it worse. His hands gripped his knees so tightly his knuckles turned white. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, not snapped, shifted, because I had swallowed this behavior for years. I had told myself, keep the peace, it's just words, don't make it worse. But that night they didn't just insult my child, they erased him, publicly, and they celebrated it. But I need to take you back a few hours. Because this didn't start at the microphone, it started in my car. The drive over was quiet. Noah stared out the window, tugging the sleeves of his sweater over his hands. Do we have to go? He asked without looking at me. Just a few hours, I told him. We eat, we smile, we leave. He nodded, but he didn't believe me. And honestly, neither did I. When we pulled onto my parents' street, I understood why he dreaded it. The Lawson house looked like a holiday magazine cover. Professional lights draped across every surface. A catering van in the driveway, a videographer setting up equipment in the front window. 50 cars lined the street. My parents never did anything small because small didn't impress anyone, and impressing people was oxygen to them. It looks like a movie set, Noah whispered. It did. A movie set where we were cast as background characters. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and performance. Every room packed with relatives, neighbors, business associates, everyone holding drinks, everyone laughing a little too loudly. My mother spotted us immediately. She glided over, air-kissed my cheek, then looked at Noah. Oh, she said, you came, not Merry Christmas, not I'm glad you're here, just you came, like we were an inconvenience she'd hoped wouldn't show up. My father followed. He shook Noah's hand too hard, the way he always did, like dominance was something that had to be established even with a child. Still fixing broken things? He asked. Noah forced a polite laugh. That fake laugh kids develop when they realize honesty is dangerous. Maybe one day you'll fix something that matters, my father added. I felt my jaw tighten, but I said nothing, not yet. Then my brother arrived, Derek. With his wife Vanessa and their son, Ethan, the golden grandchild, 14, blazer, perfect hair, state science fair champion, future Ivy League poster child. The room shifted when they walked in. People gravitated toward them like they were celebrities. There's my golden boy, my mother announced, loudly, pulling Ethan into a hug. Vanessa started listing achievements before he even set his coat down. My father clapped him on the back. That's a Lawson, he said proudly. That's what success looks like. Then he glanced across the room at Noah and shook his head, just slightly, but enough. Noah saw it, I saw him see it. And he looked down at his shoes. That was the moment I knew. Tonight wasn't going to be normal humiliation. It was going to be something bigger. Before dinner, my father dimmed the lights. Let's take a little trip down memory lane, he announced. A projector screen lowered. Slideshow started. 15 photos of Ethan, trophies, awards, handshake with the mayor, science fairs, leadership camps. Applause filled the room. Then 2 photos of Noah, one blurry in the background of a group shot, one mid-sneeze at Thanksgiving. The room laughed. Classic Noah, someone said. My father narrated it like a documentary. Future CEO, he said over Ethan's picture. Then over Noah's sneeze photo, he paused. And here's our little, he searched for the word. Handyman, more laughter. I reached for Noah's hand under the table. He didn't take it. Because by 13, he'd learned that accepting comfort in public only made it worse later. I felt something tightening in my chest, but I stayed quiet, because I was waiting. I didn't know for what, but I was waiting. After dinner, my father stood again, microphone in hand, speech about marriage, success, legacy, then his tone shifted. Margaret and I have been thinking about the future. My stomach dropped. We've decided to announce our estate plan tonight. Applause. He called Ethan forward. Ethan walked up confidently. Rehearsed. This house, my father said, would go to Ethan. The $350,000 savings fund. Also Ethan, all of it, more applause, and then casually, of course Noah isn't included. Silence for half a second, then clapping, actual clapping. My son sat beside me completely still. Then my father leaned toward someone near the front, microphone still on. You know how it is, he chuckled. One's the future and one's a failure. Laughter, relieved laughter. The kind people use when they're grateful it's not about them. Noah didn't cry, he just shrank, like he was trying to make himself smaller, easier to ignore, easier to discard. And that's when something inside me stopped protecting the peace. Because protecting the peace had cost my son his dignity. I stood up, the chair scraped against the floor, 50 heads turned, my father frowned. Stephanie, sit down. I smiled, the calmest I had felt all night. No, Dad, I said, I'm about to embarrass you, and I walked toward him. Toward the microphone, toward the moment that would change everything. The claws they never saw coming, I didn't rush. That was the first thing, I didn't storm the stage, I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I walked. Slowly. And every step felt like something locking into place. My father tried to block me halfway. Sit down, he muttered under his breath, smile still plastered on for the guests. You're embarrassing yourself. I leaned in slightly. No, I said softly, I'm about to embarrass you. And I took the microphone from his hand. He didn't expect that. No one did. The room went silent so fast it felt like the air had been vacuumed out. I scanned the crowd, phones were up. Recording, good. My son, I began, steady voice, controlled breath, is not a failure. The words echoed, clear, sharp. My son is kind, my son is capable, my son fixes things most people throw away. I turned toward my father. You just threw him away in front of 50 witnesses. No one laughed now. The Christmas tree lights hummed faintly behind me. My mother's smile was gone. Her fingers trembled where they gripped the edge of the table. But here's what you don't know, I continued. I let the pause stretch, retention moment, suspense. Grandpa Henry saw exactly what this family does. My mother flinched, actually flinched. And he prepared for it. My father scoffed. This is ridiculous. He created something, I cut in, still calm. An educational skills trust. Murmurs, what are you talking about? Derek asked from near the tree. I'm taking about a legally binding trust, I said, eyes never leaving my father's, specifically designed for vocational and technical education, for the kind of intelligence that isn't measured by trophies. I looked at Noah. He was staring at me, not scared, hopeful, for the kind of intelligence my son has. My father's confidence started to crack. Dad never mentioned any trust. He wouldn't have mentioned it to you, I replied. Because he knew exactly what you would do. The room shifted. You could feel it. Power doesn't disappear quietly, it slides. And in that moment it started sliding away from my father. There's also a protection clause, I said. That word did it. Clause. Legal language makes arrogant people nervous. If the beneficiary, that's Noah, is ever publicly excluded from family inheritance due to bias or publicly humiliated in a family setting, I let that hang. Then full control of the trust transfers immediately to his legal guardian. I placed my hand against my chest. That's me. Silence, real silence. You could hear someone's ice clink in a glass. You stood in front of 50 people, I continued, and called my son a failure. You announced he was excluded. You applauded it. I scanned the room. You all witnessed it. Phones lowered slightly. People avoided eye contact. My father's face cycled through disbelief, then anger, then something new, fear. That's not how trusts work, he snapped. Henry was sick at the end. He didn't know what he was signing. 3 years before he died, I replied evenly. Witnessed, notarized, filmed. That last word hit harder than I expected. Filmed, Vanessa whispered. Yes. My Uncle Franklin stood up slowly in the back. He hadn't spoken all night. He didn't need to. I was there, he said. The room turned. I witnessed the signing, Franklin continued. So did the attorney. Henry knew exactly what he was doing. My father stared at him like betrayal had just taken physical form. Franklin, my mother whispered, you knew? I tried to tell you, Maggie, he said quietly. You didn't want to hear it. The air was thick now, heavy. My brother Derek looked trapped between sides. Vanessa looked furious. Ethan wasn't smiling anymore. He was looking at Noah, not with superiority, with confusion, recognition, and something like doubt. This is manipulation, Vanessa snapped. You planned this? No, I said calmly. You planned tonight? That landed hard. My father stepped closer to me. You ungrateful little, careful, I said softly. I gestured around the room. 50 phones. Murmurs began spreading. Someone near the back whispered, did he really call that kid a failure? I have it on video, another voice responded. And that's when I knew the narrative was shifting, not because I shouted louder, but because truth is powerful when it's recorded. You think money makes you powerful, I said to my father. You think public approval makes you untouchable. I leaned slightly closer. But Grandpa Henry knew better. I lowered the microphone slightly, intimate tone now. He knew that in this family there's always a golden child. My eyes flicked toward Ethan. And there's always someone you decide to sacrifice. I looked back at my father. You just picked wrong. My mother suddenly sat down heavily, her composure finally cracking. This wasn't supposed to happen, she muttered. No, it wasn't. Because they assumed I'd stay quiet, like I always had, but protecting the peace had been costing my son his self-worth. And I was done paying that price. My father made one last attempt to regain control. Even if this trust exists, he said, voice tight, you think it matters? We have better lawyers, we'll contest it. There's an anti-contest clause, I replied instantly. His eyes widened slightly. Anyone who challenges the trust forfeits any claim to Henry's remaining assets. I smiled faintly. Did you know he owned property in Florida? That did it. That was the crack in the armor, because my father didn't know. Which meant he hadn't controlled everything. For the first time in my life, I saw him off balance. You think you've won something? He hissed. No, I said calmly. I think I've protected my son. And that was the difference between us. He was fighting for dominance. I was fighting for dignity, and dignity always lasts longer. In the back of the room, someone started clapping. Just one person, then another. Then a third, not everyone, but enough to break the illusion. Noah stood up slowly beside his chair. His hands were shaking slightly, but his voice was steady. I didn't know about any trust, he said. The entire room turned toward him. I didn't know Grandpa left me anything. I just knew he was the only person who didn't make me feel broken. You could feel people swallowing guilt. I'm sorry I'm not what you wanted, Noah continued, looking directly at my father. I'm sorry I like fixing things instead of winning trophies. He took a breath. But I'm not a failure, I'm just different. Complete silence. Then he added something I will never forget. Grandpa used to say the people who fix things keep the world running, the rest just take credit. That hit the room like a truth bomb. My father didn't respond. He couldn't, because for once there was nothing clever left to say. I placed the microphone down gently on the table. We're leaving, I said. I reached for Noah's hand. This time he took it. As we walked toward the door, my father's voice followed us. This isn't over, Stephanie. I turned once, calm. Controlled. No, I said quietly. It's just beginning. And we stepped into the cold December air. The Christmas lights behind us no longer looked festive. They looked like warning signs. Inside the car, neither of us spoke at first. Not because there was nothing to say, but because too much had been said. Finally, Noah asked quietly, did Grandpa really do all that for me? I glanced at him. Yes, I said. He believed in you. Noah nodded slowly. He always did. My phone buzzed, then again, and again, texts flooding in, my mother, my brother, unknown numbers, and one message from Bernard Shaw, Henry's attorney. They're going to fight this. Call me tomorrow. There's something else you need to know. Something else. Of course there was, because families like mine never implode cleanly. They fracture. And when they fracture, secrets spill out. As I pulled into our driveway, I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. For the first time in years, I had not swallowed my words. For the first time, I had not protected the peace. And for the first time, my son had seen what it looked like when someone chose him. But I didn't know yet that my father wasn't just embarrassed. He was planning. And whatever Bernard Shaw meant by something else was about to change everything again. The recording he never knew existed. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that room, every glance, every whisper. Every crack in my father's voice when the word Florida left my mouth, because men like him don't crumble, they retaliate. And at 6:12 a.m. my phone rang. Bernard Shaw. I stepped into the kitchen so Noah wouldn't hear. Tell me, I said, there was no small talk. They've already contacted 2 firms, Bernard replied. They're moving fast. Of course they were, speed is intimidation. But here's the thing, he continued. They're not just contesting the trust. My stomach tightened. What are they doing? They're claiming Henry was manipulated. I almost laughed. Manipulated. The man who built 3 companies before he was 40. The man who refused morphine because he didn't like feeling foggy. Manipulated. By who? I asked, though I already knew. By you. There it was, the real strategy. If they couldn't erase the trust, they would erase me. They're preparing to argue undue influence, Bernard continued, painting you as financially desperate, suggesting you pressured him into restructuring assets. I leaned against the counter, slow inhale, slow exhale. They're going to try to destroy my credibility. Yes, and they don't know about the recording. Silence. I straightened. What recording? Bernard's voice lowered. Henry anticipated this. Of course he did. He asked me to film a private conversation the day he signed the final amendment. It was his idea. The room felt smaller. What's on it? I asked. Bernard paused. Everything. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Bernard's office. The same office where Henry used to sit in that leather chair and complain about corporate mediocrity. Bernard slid a tablet across the desk. Before you watch this, he said, understand something. If this goes public, it changes the entire family dynamic permanently. It already has, I replied. He nodded and pressed play. The screen flickered. There he was. Grandpa Henry, thinner than I remembered, paler but sharp, sharp eyes. Sharp mind, sharp voice. Is this thing recording? Henry asked. Yes, Mr. Whitmore, Bernard's younger voice responded off camera. Henry adjusted in his chair. If you're watching this, he began, looking directly into the lens, it means my son has done exactly what I expect him to do. My throat tightened. He will try to intimidate, he will try to threaten, he will try to question my mental capacity. Henry leaned forward. Let the record show I am of sound mind, I am not confused, and I am not being manipulated. He paused. Then he said something that made my hands tremble. I am correcting a mistake. Bernard glanced at me. I didn't blink. My greatest mistake, Henry continued, was raising my son to believe performance equals worth. The words landed like thunder. He measures love in achievements, he mistakes obedience for loyalty. Henry sighed softly. And he will crush that boy, Noah. He already has, Henry added quietly. I've watched it. The screen showed Henry reaching for something off camera. A small metal toolbox, old, worn. I asked Noah to fix this hinge, Henry said, tapping it. It took him 3 attempts, 3, he refused to quit. A faint smile touched his lips. That's intelligence? He looked directly into the camera again. Not applause, not trophies, persistence. Henry's voice hardened. If my son humiliates that child publicly, the clause activates. There it was, cold, clear, final. And if he contests this trust, he forfeits the remaining estate. He leaned back. Some lessons require consequences. Then softer, Stephanie, if you're seeing this, don't protect the peace anymore. My breath caught. Peace without respect is surrender. The video ended. The room felt heavy. Alive. Bernard folded his hands. You understand what this means? Yes, I whispered. It meant Henry hadn't just anticipated a legal challenge. He anticipated a public one. He expected humiliation. He predicted the exact scenario that unfolded at Christmas. Which meant something else too. Henry didn't just leave Noah money, he left him validation. Proof. And that was more powerful than inheritance. By noon, the counterattack began. An article went live on a local business blog. Whitmore family trust under investigation amid manipulation allegations. Investigation, allegations. Manipulation, they were building a narrative, painting me as opportunistic, resentful, financially unstable. I received 3 calls from numbers I didn't recognize. One voicemail said, care to comment on the estate dispute? They were leaking it. Intentionally, I felt the old instinct rising, the one that said stay quiet, avoid drama, protect the family name. But then I remembered Henry's words. Peace without respect is surrender. At 2:17 p.m., my father called. I answered. You've embarrassed this family, he said without greeting. You embarrassed it first, I replied. This isn't about Noah, he snapped. This is about control. Yes, I said evenly, it is. Silence. He wasn't used to agreement. You think that video saves you? He said finally. I froze. You don't know what I have, I replied carefully. I know my father, he said, and I know he never trusted you. That one stung because it was almost believable, almost. You should have stayed quiet, he continued. You forced my hand. And what does that mean? Another pause, then. It means we escalate. The line went dead. That evening, Bernard called again. They filed a formal petition, he said. Emergency hearing in 10 days. 10 days. They're requesting a temporary freeze on trust assets. Of course they were. Financial suffocation, classic tactic. Can they? I asked. They can try. I looked across the living room. Noah was at the table carefully repairing an old lamp we found at a thrift store. Focused, precise, unaffected by legal warfare, or at least pretending to be. I walked over. Hey, I said softly. He looked up. You okay? He nodded. Are we in trouble? I crouched beside him. Not the kind that matters. He studied my face. Grandpa wouldn't lie, right? No, I said immediately. He nodded once. Then I'm not scared. That was when I realized something. My father didn't understand fear the way I did. He thought fear came from money, from legal pressure, from reputation damage, but Noah's fear had always been simpler, rejection, and that had already happened, which meant my father's greatest weapon had lost its edge. 3 days later, something unexpected happened. Ethan showed up at our house. Alone, no announcement, no Vanessa, just him. I opened the door cautiously. I need to talk to you, he said. He looked smaller without the spotlight, less certain. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, taking in the modest furniture, the repaired lamp, the quiet. I saw the video, he said. My heart skipped. What video? Grandpa's? So it had leaked, or someone shared it. He swallowed. He didn't show that side around us. I nodded. Because you didn't need it. He winced. I didn't know about the clause. I know. Silence stretched. I never meant for it to go that far at Christmas, he said finally. Dad pushed the announcement. There it was, confirmation. He wanted a public statement, Ethan continued. He said strength requires clarity. Strength, I almost laughed. Do you agree? I asked. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the table where Noah sat quietly, pretending not to listen. No, Ethan said softly. And for the first time, I saw the beginning of doubt inside the golden child. But doubt doesn't stop men like my father, control does, and 3 days before the hearing, Bernard called me again. They've submitted something new, he said. What now? A psychological evaluation request. For who? For Noah. The words made my blood run cold. They're suggesting he lacks the capacity to manage trust decisions. They want the court to appoint oversight. There it was. If they couldn't attack me, they'd undermine him, call him unstable, immature, incapable. Same word, different courtroom. Failure. I looked at Noah across the room. He was aligning tiny screws in perfect rows before installing them. Methodical, precise, focused. And I felt something solidify inside me. They could challenge me. They could smear me. But they would not label my son defective. Not again. I picked up my phone. Bernard, I said calmly, prepare the recording. You're sure? He asked. Yes. Once we use it, he warned, there's no going back. I looked at Noah. At the steady hands, the quiet strength, the persistence Henry saw. We already crossed that line, I said, and somewhere across town my father was probably smiling, confident, strategizing, unaware that the one thing he feared most wasn't money. It wasn't exposure. It was losing control of the narrative. And in 10 days, that narrative was about to shatter in a courtroom full of witnesses. The day control slipped, the courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, emotionally, cold wood benches, neutral walls, fluorescent lights that flattened everyone's faces into something almost artificial. This wasn't a Christmas party. There were no decorations here, no applause, no champagne glasses, just consequences. Noah sat beside me, hands folded in his lap, not fidgeting, not shaking, just still. Across the aisle sat my father. Perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect mask. Next to him, 2 attorneys, expensive ones, the kind who bill by the minute and smile like they already own the outcome. My mother sat behind him. She wouldn't look at me. Ethan was there too. But he wasn't sitting with them. He chose a bench alone. That mattered. The judge entered, everyone stood, and just like that, the performance began. My father's attorney opened first, confident, measured, polished. Your Honor, he began, this is a tragic case of undue influence exerted over a vulnerable elderly man. Vulnerable. The word irritated me more than it should have. They painted Henry as confused, emotionally manipulated, pressured into restructuring his estate in favor of one grandchild while alienating the rest of his family. They referenced my financial history, my divorce, the years I worked 2 jobs. They framed survival as desperation. They framed protection as ambition. Then they shifted. Additionally, the attorney continued smoothly, we have reason to question the psychological maturity of the minor beneficiary. There it was, the knife, subtle, professional, cruel. They requested a court-ordered evaluation. Oversight, delay. They didn't need to win immediately, they just needed to stall long enough to suffocate us. When they finished, my father didn't look at me, he looked straight ahead. Like I was already erased, Bernard stood, calm, unbothered. Your Honor, he began, the opposition has presented a compelling narrative. Pause, but narratives are not evidence. He outlined the timeline, the notarized signatures, the witnesses, the anti-contest clause, then he paused, and we have something further. My father's attorney shifted slightly. Bernard looked at the judge. With the court's permission, we would like to submit a video recording made voluntarily by Mr. Henry Whitmore at the time of the trust amendment. There it was. The shift, the judge adjusted her glasses. A recording, she asked. Yes, Your Honor, a clear statement of intent. The courtroom grew quieter, my father's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected it to surface this early. Permission was granted. Bernard connected the tablet to the courtroom display, and then Henry appeared on the large screen, bigger than life, thinner than I remembered, but unmistakably himself. If you're watching this, Henry began, it means my son has done exactly what I expect him to do. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Even the judge leaned slightly forward. Henry spoke clearly, directly, confidently. He addressed his mental state. He addressed the clause. He addressed the humiliation trigger. And then he will crush that boy. The words echoed against courtroom walls. You could feel the oxygen shift. My father's attorney stiffened. Henry continued. Performance is not worth, persistence is. Noah's fingers tightened around mine. He didn't cry, he didn't look down, he watched. Every word, when Henry finished with, peace without respect is surrender. The video ended, and the silence that followed was absolute. The judge looked toward my father's side. Counsel, for the first time since this began, their composure cracked. They requested a brief recess. Denied. The judge wasn't interested in theatrics. Do you contest the authenticity of this recording? She asked. My father's attorney hesitated. That half-second hesitation, that was the fracture. No, Your Honor, he finally said. Then we will proceed under the assumption that Mr. Whitmore's intent was clear. Intent, clarity, 2 things my father built his empire on. Now working against him, then something happened that I didn't anticipate. My father stood up, without being asked. Your Honor, he said, voice steady but tight, with respect, this video does not represent the full context of my father's condition. The judge raised an eyebrow. And are you a medical professional, Mr. Whitmore? No. Then I would advise you to let your counsel speak for you. A few restrained chuckles moved through the gallery. My father sat down, but not before shooting me a look. Not anger, not even hatred, it was something colder, realization. He was losing control. Then came the turning point. Bernard addressed the psychological evaluation request. Your Honor, he said, the minor beneficiary has maintained a clean academic and behavioral record. We are prepared to submit statements from teachers, mentors, and community leaders. He paused. But more importantly, we reject the implication that choosing a vocational path constitutes diminished capacity. That sentence landed heavily, because that was the real bias at play. The belief that intelligence must look a certain way. The judge nodded slowly. The court does not equate non-traditional academic interests with incompetence, she said firmly. And just like that, the evaluation request was denied. Denied, clean, final. I felt Noah exhale beside me. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath. Neither had I, but my father wasn't finished. He leaned toward his attorney, whispered something, and then the attorney stood again. Your Honor, in light of this development, we would like to raise concerns regarding potential coercion. The judge's patience was thinning. On what grounds? The attorney glanced at me. We have reason to believe the beneficiary's guardian influenced the events at the Christmas gathering in order to activate the clause intentionally. There it was. They were claiming I staged it, that I provoked humiliation, that I baited my father, a strategic trap. I almost admired the audacity, but Bernard didn't flinch. Your Honor, he said calmly, we have over 40 independent video recordings from that evening. He looked directly at my father, none of which show my client prompting, provoking, or manipulating the announcement. He let that settle. In fact, he continued, the humiliation appears entirely voluntary, self-inflicted. My father's expression hardened because he understood something now. He hadn't been trapped. He had revealed himself. The judge made her ruling shortly after. The trust remains active. No asset freeze, no evaluation, no oversight. The anti-contest clause stands, and if further litigation is pursued without new evidence, penalties may apply. It wasn't a total victory, but it was decisive, clear, public. My father stood slowly as the session ended. People in the gallery whispered, not loudly, but enough. Reputation doesn't shatter in explosions, it erodes in murmurs. As we stepped into the hallway, Ethan approached first. He didn't speak, he just nodded once. A silent acknowledgement. Then he walked away from his father. That mattered more than money ever could. But the real moment came outside the courthouse. Reporters had gathered, small crowd, local press, cameras ready. My father moved toward them first. Of course he did, control the narrative, always. This is a private family matter, he began smoothly. We respect the court's decision and will evaluate our options. Corporate tone, damage control, then one reporter asked. Mr. Whitmore, is it true your father predicted this conflict? The question hit. Because now the story wasn't about money, it was about foresight and failure. My father hesitated just slightly, and in that hesitation, cameras clicked. He turned away, didn't answer. That was the moment control slipped, not in the courtroom, not during the ruling, but right there, when silence replaced authority. Inside the car, Noah finally spoke. Did we win? I looked at him. We protected what matters, I said. He nodded slowly. Then after a pause, Grandpa would have liked that. Yes, he would have, but as we drove home, my phone buzzed again, a message from Bernard. They're not done. Of course they weren't. Men who live on dominance don't retire quietly. They adapt, they look for angles, and when I pulled into the driveway, there was a black SUV parked across the street, engine off, windows tinted, watching. My father had lost the courtroom, but I had a feeling he was about to change the battlefield. And this time, it wouldn't be public, it would be personal. The black SUV didn't move for 3 days, not once. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be, it was a message, we're still here. No one noticed it the second morning. Are they watching us? He asked quietly while buttering toast. Probably, I answered. I didn't sugarcoat things anymore. He nodded slowly. Okay, that was it. No panic, no fear, just information processed and filed away. He had learned something valuable through all this. When people try to intimidate you, they want a reaction. Silence starves them. On the 4th day, Bernard called again. They're pivoting, he said. To what? The Florida property? I closed my eyes, of course. The one asset my father hadn't known about until that Christmas night. What about it? I asked. There's a corporate structure attached to it, an LLC Henry created years ago, and you're listed as managing partner. My heart stopped for half a second. I didn't know that. I know, Bernard said. That's the point. Henry had layered protection into protection, insurance over insurance. What does it mean? I asked. It means the Florida property isn't technically part of the Whitmore estate. I sat down slowly. It's separate, yes. Then why are they going after it? Bernard exhaled. Because they just realized something. What? Henry didn't just predict the humiliation. He paused. He predicted your father's reaction? That afternoon, I drove to Bernard's office again. This time, he handed me a folder. Inside were corporate documents. Signatures, dates, structures I barely understood. Henry created the LLC 12 years ago, Bernard explained. He funded it through consulting revenue, not inheritance assets. Why? Because he knew your father would fight anything attached to the family name. Bernard leaned forward. This property was designed to be untouchable. And I'm managing partner, yes. Why me? Bernard held my gaze. Because he trusted you. The weight of that settled slowly. Trust. Henry hadn't just protected Noah. He had empowered me strategically, quietly, years before any of this unfolded. That evening my father came to the house. No SUV this time, no witnesses, just him. Standing at my door, I opened it but didn't step aside. What do you want? I asked. He looked different, less polished, more tired. You're enjoying this, he said. No, I replied calmly. I'm surviving it. He studied my face. You think this ends well for you? I think it ends honestly. His jaw tightened. Sell me the Florida property. There it was, direct, transactional. No, he didn't hesitate. I'll double its value. No, triple. I almost smiled. You don't understand, he said sharply. That land connects to adjacent development I control. Without it, the project stalls. Ah, so that was it, leverage. Henry had positioned the property like a chess piece, blocking expansion, restricting dominance, and my father needed it. Then I guess your project stalls, I said softly. His composure cracked. You're being irrational. No, I said. I'm being strategic. Silence stretched between us. Cold, measured. You're punishing me, he said. I shook my head slowly. No, I'm letting you experience consequence. That word again. Consequence. Henry's word. My father stepped closer. Do you know what happens to people who cross me? Yes, I said. They learn who you really are. He stared at me, searching for fear, finding none. Sell it, he said one last time. I leaned slightly against the doorframe. Transfer Noah's educational fund into a permanent, irrevocable account. Publicly acknowledge him as an equal beneficiary, and issue a statement correcting your remarks. He laughed once, bitter. You want me to humiliate myself? No, I replied. I want accountability. He stared at me for a long moment, then he said something I didn't expect. You've changed. I held his gaze. No, I said quietly. I stopped shrinking. And for the first time in my life, he didn't have a response. He turned and walked away. No threats, no final words, just retreat. 2 weeks passed. The SUV never returned. The media cycle shifted to another scandal. The courtroom ruling stood untouched. And then one morning, a press release went live. Whitmore Development announces strategic realignment. Corporate language, neutral tone. But buried inside a paragraph. Mr. Whitmore acknowledges prior statements made regarding family educational paths were inappropriate and unreflective of personal growth values. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't warm. But it was public. That mattered. 2 days later, funds transferred into Noah's account. Permanent, irrevocable, signed, sealed, documented. He never called me to negotiate again because he understood something now. The Florida property wasn't for sale. It was leverage, and I had no intention of cashing it in. Months later, Noah and I visited the property. Florida sunlight felt different. Open, unburdened. The house wasn't extravagant. But it was peaceful. Noah walked along the dock, examining wood grain like it held secrets. I could build something here, he said quietly. I know, I replied. He looked back at me. You really didn't plan any of this, did you? I smiled faintly. No. Then how did you win? I thought about that, about the courtroom, the video, the humiliation, the SUV, the negotiation. I didn't try to win, I said. I refused to lose. He nodded slowly, processing. Then he said something that felt like closure. Grandpa didn't just leave me money. No, I said softly. He left you protection. And more than that, he left us proof. Proof that intelligence isn't loud, power isn't shouting, and revenge, it doesn't need to scream to be effective. Ethan called once, months later. He left his father's company, started something smaller, independent. I didn't see it before, he admitted over coffee. See what? I asked. That control isn't strength. He looked tired but lighter. Some battles ripple beyond their origin. My father and I never reconciled, not truly. We coexist at a distance. Strategic, measured. He doesn't mention the trust. I don't mention the development project that never materialized. Some wars end without apologies, GJK, but with boundaries. And sometimes that's enough. One evening, long after the headlines faded, Noah handed me something. A small metal hinge, repaired perfectly. "Remember this?" he asked. Grandpa's toolbox hinge, the one from the video. I ran my thumb over the smooth edge. "It only took 3 tries," he said. I smiled. "Persistence," I whispered. He grinned slightly. "Exactly." And in that moment, I realized something powerful. The greatest revenge wasn't the courtroom victory. It wasn't the public statement. It wasn't the stalled development. It was this: a boy who no longer believed he was broken. A family narrative rewritten, quietly, permanently. My father spent his life measuring worth by dominance, by applause, by visible power. Henry understood something deeper. The people who fix things keep the world running, and sometimes they fix what arrogance breaks. I didn't destroy my father. I didn't ruin his company. I didn't expose every secret. I did something far more unsettling. I refused to play his game, and when the game lost its opponent, it collapsed on its own. That's the kind of revenge no one sees coming. Silent, strategic, final.